You ever look at a man and think, now, there's someone who's got it all together? That was Darius Colton. At 38, he was the kind of man people in Eastwood, Michigan, nodded to with respect. A former Marine who walked with purpose. Broad shoulders, calloused hands, a voice that didn't need to be loud to carry weight. He was the guy you called when your car wouldn't start, or when your life did. Darius worked the docks at the Lawson shipping warehouse on Detroit's outskirts. A job most wouldn't last a month doing. He'd been at it for nearly a decade. Double shifts, weekends, whatever it took. Not for luxury, not for pride, for his family. Melina, his wife of 12 years, ran the house with grace and quiet charm. She had that PDA mom vibe. Neat hair, warm smile, good with names. And the kids? 4 of them, each bursting with energy and laughter. To the outside world, the Coltons were a picture of stability, of success. A black family rooted in love and responsibility. Their home sat on a quiet street lined with trimmed hedges and dogwood trees. The kind of place where kids rode bikes till sundown and neighbors brought over cobbler for birthdays. Every weekend, the scent of charcoal and hickory would drift from Darius' backyard as he stood over the grill, tongs in one hand, a cold beer in the other, watching his kids race through the grass. It looked perfect, too perfect. But here's the thing about perfection. It's often just a curtain. And behind that curtain? Oh, the truths it hides. Because beneath that flawless exterior was a man holding something deep. Not just responsibility, but fear. The fear of failing them. Of not being enough. Of losing the life he had poured himself into. Darius wasn't the type to talk about his feelings. He was a Marine, after all. He carried his pain like a rucksack, tight on the back, close to the skin. But even he couldn't ignore the occasional flicker of doubt. The youngest, Caleb, had these hazel eyes. Strange thing, neither he nor Melina had hazel eyes. He chalked it up to recessive genes. Maybe her grandfather or something. And the oldest, Tiana, she was tall, quick-witted, sharp-tongued. Nothing unusual there, except once, just once, someone joked that she didn't look much like Darius. He laughed it off, because that's what you do, right? You trust the woman you built a life with. You trust the family you raised. You don't go digging for answers when the ground beneath you seems solid. But the cracks, oh, they were there. Tiny ones. Whisper thin, but they were growing. Still, Darius kept showing up. Kept loving. Kept working. Kept believing that all his sacrifices meant something. He wasn't flashy. Didn't care for recognition. His reward came in simpler forms. A hug from his kids when he walked through the door, the sound of their laughter as they tackled each other on the living room carpet, Melina's kiss on the cheek when he sat down to dinner. That was his currency. And yet, somewhere deep inside, something stirred. A shadow, a silence, a feeling he couldn't name. He ignored it, buried it under overtime shifts and Saturday morning cartoons with his sons. He told himself it was just exhaustion, stress, maybe even paranoia. But if you've ever had a gut feeling, a real one, then you know it doesn't go away. It waits, patiently, quietly, until it can't be ignored anymore. And for Darius Colton, that moment was coming. Oh, it was coming fast. But for now, the Coltons laughed and loved like any other family on the block. They smiled for photos, showed up to church, hosted 4th of July cookouts with sparklers and ribs on the grill. And no one could have guessed the storm that was brewing just beneath that calm. A storm that would tear through everything they had built and leave behind nothing but ashes and questions. It always starts small. A hesitation, a glance that lingers too long, a thought you try to shake off. For Darius Colton, it was the silence between questions. Not the kind you notice at first, but the kind that builds like a whisper in the dark. He'd sit on the edge of the bed after a 12-hour shift, unlacing his boots while Melina folded laundry and the kids ran wild down the hallway. And something would gnaw at him. Something off. It wasn't Caleb's eyes this time. It wasn't the slope of his daughter's nose or the way the twins talked with their hands. No, it wasn't anything he could point to and say, that's it. It was the feeling. The kind that curls around your ribs when you love something too much and start to wonder if it really belongs to you. But Darius wasn't a man to chase ghosts. He'd been trained to dismiss doubt. In the military, you didn't flinch. You held the line. even when your hand shook. So he stayed quiet. He smiled through birthday parties, took the kids to doctor's appointments, kissed Melina's cheek every morning. And at night, he stared at the ceiling longer than he should have. You're overthinking, he told himself. You're tired. You're stressed. That's all this is. And for a while, that lie worked. Until it didn't. It was a Thursday evening when the mask began to slip. The house was tense. Darius had asked about a missing bank transaction. Just a few $100s, nothing major. But Melina snapped. Why are you always watching me? She barked, slamming a cabinet door. You think I'm hiding something? The room went still. Darius didn't raise his voice, didn't yell. He just stared, because deep down, yes, he did. Her reaction wasn't anger. It was fear, and that was new. Later that night, she went to bed early. He stayed up, just him and a half-empty bottle of beer, the television muted, the sound of the refrigerator humming like static behind his thoughts. And that's when the question finally broke through. What if they're not mine? The words felt poisonous in his mouth, like betrayal, like blasphemy. But they were there now, and they weren't leaving. He stared at the family photo on the mantel. Melina smiling, the kids grinning, his own hand resting proudly on Caleb's tiny shoulder. Was it all a lie? Was his entire life built on a foundation someone else had poured behind his back? That night, while Melina slept beside him, Darius quietly opened his phone and searched. At-home DNA paternity test. He didn't breathe, didn't blink. His fingers moved like they weren't even his. He found a site, fast shipping, discreet packaging. He ordered 4 kits, 1 for each child. He didn't think. He just did it. And once it was done, he felt nothing. No guilt, no fear, just numbness. Like a man who had just stepped off a cliff but hadn't hit the ground yet. The kits arrived 3 days later. He intercepted the package before Melina could see it, said it was tools for the garage. She didn't ask. She never did anymore. One by one, over the next week, he collected the samples. Casual, quiet, almost mechanical. A cheek swab here. A playful joke there. The kids didn't suspect a thing. And when the final sample was sealed and ready to ship, he stood in the bathroom for almost an hour, staring at the envelope like it might explode. Because in that moment, the truth was still a choice. Still something he could avoid. But once that envelope left his hands, there would be no going back. Darius mailed it the next morning. He didn't tell anyone. Not his cousin Marcus. Not his friends. Not even the mirror. He just waited. And during that wait, the house felt different. Every giggle from the kids, every kiss from Melina, every casual I love you, it all felt tainted. Not because he knew the truth yet, but because he feared it. What if the DNA didn't lie? What if the life he bled for wasn't even his? He told himself he could handle it, that he'd stay no matter what. That love was stronger than blood. But deep down, a voice whispered, "You're lying to yourself." And the worst part? He knew that voice sounded just like his own. The results would arrive in 7 days. 7 long, aching, sleepless days. Darius didn't pray, didn't plead. He just waited. And with each passing hour, the man he was, the man everyone knew, began to disappear. Because truth doesn't just arrive in the mail. It rips through the soul like a bullet. The message came at 2:17 p.m. Just a simple ping on his phone, nestled in the cup holder of his old Ford F-150. Your DNA results are ready. That was it. No fanfare. No warning. Just a notification, cold, clinical, and unassuming. But for Darius Colton, it may as well have been a bomb. He was sitting alone in the warehouse parking lot, long after his shift had ended. His hands were cracked from lifting pallets all day. His back ached. His shoulders were sore. But nothing compared to the weight pressing down on his chest. He'd stare at that message for 15 full minutes without touching it. The world outside the windshield moved on. Birds, cars, clouds drifting slow and soft through the late afternoon sky. But inside that cab, time had stopped. His thumb hovered over the screen. Do it. He clicked. The screen loaded, painfully slow. Every buffering will felt like a countdown to something irreversible. His heart pounded so loud, it drowned out the hum of the engine. Then came the first name. Tiana Colton, not the biological father. His throat closed. His breath hitched. No, that's wrong. He blinked, refreshed the page. Read it again. Not the biological father. Then the second name. Jalen Colton, not the biological father. Then the third. Cameron Colton, not the biological father. And finally, the baby. Caleb Colton, not the biological father. All four. Every single one. Not his. He stared at the screen, waiting for it to change. Waiting for the cruel joke to reveal itself. Waiting for something, anything, to make this not real. But the words didn't budge. Not the biological father. Again, and again, and again. 4 times. Over. A sound escaped him. Low, guttural, half growl, half sob. He slammed both fists into the steering wheel. The horn blared into the silence, sharp and sudden, then fell quiet again. He leaned back, winded, his chest heaving like he'd just run into a burning building and couldn't find the door out. Tears welled in his eyes but didn't fall. His body was too stunned to cry. Memories hit him like waves. Tiana's first dance recital. Jalen's busted knee from the soccer field. Cameron's science fair project. Caleb's tiny hand gripping his finger in the hospital. He was there for all of it. He loved them through all of it. And it turns out, he was never really their father. Not in blood. Not in biology. 12 years. 4 children. 1,000 sacrifices. 1,000,000 moments. Built on a lie. He thought of Melina. Her eyes. Her smile. The way she'd hug him after long shifts. The way she whispered, "Thank you," when the kids were asleep. All of it fake. Or worse, intentional. He shook his head, hard, as if that might shake the pain loose. She knew. She had to know. Darius remembered birthdays, holidays, Father's Day cards. God, all those Father's Day cards. The kids drawing little stick figures, saying, "I love you, Dad," while she smiled from behind the camera. How do you stand there and let someone love a lie? How do you do that? He looked down at his hands. The same hands that built bunk beds, packed lunches, fixed bikes, held them through nightmares. They trembled. Not from fear. From fury. A silent, volcanic rage. The kind that doesn't yell, it simmers. The kind that doesn't break things, it breaks you. He pressed his forehead to the steering wheel. The cold leather felt good against his skin. Grounding. Real. But the reality around him? That was too much. He stayed in that truck for nearly an hour. Didn't move. Didn't speak. Just sat. Alone. Lost. A man who'd just discovered that everything he thought was his wasn't. And the worst part? He still loved them. The kids. They were innocent. They didn't choose this. They didn't lie. But Melina? She had. She made that choice. 4 times. She handed him those children like they were his, watched him give everything he had, time, energy, hope, and never once said a word. That's not just betrayal. That's erasure. That's rewriting someone's life without asking. And now what was left? Who was he? If he wasn't a father, a husband? Just a man with a paycheck and 4 strangers calling him dad. His phone chimed again. He ignored it. He turned off the engine. The silence inside the truck was deafening. And in that silence, something broke. Not loudly, not all at once, but like ice cracking under pressure, slow, irreversible. Darius Colton stepped out of his truck a different man than the one who had driven it into that lot. He wasn't just hurt. He was hollow. And what comes next? That's when the silence turns into something far, far more dangerous. The kitchen was still warm from dinner. The scent of baked chicken lingered in the air. Plates sat untouched in the sink. A few crumbs clung to the edge of the countertops like nothing was out of place. Like life was still normal. But nothing was normal anymore. Darius Colton stood just a few feet from his wife, his feet planted like concrete, a thick envelope in his hand. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. Melina turned from the fridge, tucking a container of leftovers inside. When she saw his face, pale, eyes hollow, jaw clenched, her movements slowed. "What's wrong?" she asked. Darius didn't speak. He simply extended the envelope. The DNA results. Her eyes dropped to it, then back up to him. She didn't take it. He tossed it on a counter. The papers fanned out like a silent explosion, each page marked with the same damning conclusion. Not the biological father. 4 times. She stared at them. At first, she said nothing. Her expression unreadable. Then, without even touching the papers, she crossed her arms. Her voice was calm, measured. "They're still your kids, Darius." "What?" His jaw twitched. A muscle pulsed in his neck. His fist clenched by his side. "I'm not asking how they feel," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm asking you a question." His eyes locked on hers. "Whose kids are they?" Her gaze didn't falter. "You raised them. You love them. That's what matters." Deflection. Even now, after everything, she wouldn't give him the truth. No apology. No remorse. Just a spin. A manipulation. He took a slow step forward, the papers crunching under his boot. 12 years, Melina, he said, voice low and sharp. "I worked myself to the bone. Missed holidays. Took extra shifts. Turned down promotions. For them. For you." Melina's arms tightened. "And they're your family," she snapped. "You think some lab report changes that?" Darius blinked, stunned. Then something inside him cracked. He slammed his hand down on the counter hard. The plates rattled in the sink. "Don't you dare twist this on me." Melina flinched. For the first time, her mask slipped. "You let me love them," he hissed. "You watched me become a father. And you said nothing. Not once. You looked me in the eye and lied every single day." "They needed you," she shouted, suddenly defensive. "What was I supposed to do? Tear it all apart?" He stared at her like she was a stranger. "Because she was. I was a father," he said softly. "And I didn't even get to choose. You stole that from me." Melina's voice cracked. "I didn't know how to tell you. I was scared." "No," he cut in. "You weren't scared. You were selfish. You buried the truth. You watched me build a life around a lie. And you let me." Silence. The weight of 12 years collapsed into that moment. And then, like she couldn't take the heat of her own actions, Melina turned away. "We can get through this," she said, voice softer now. "Counseling something. We can start over." "Start over." Darius let out a bitter laugh, dry, humorless, shaking his head in disbelief. "You want to hit a reset button like this is a game?" he asked. "You think I can know this?" She looked over her shoulder, eyes glassy now. "They still need you." He stared at her. Hard. "I don't even know who I am anymore." Then he said it. "I don't know who you are." And with that, he walked out of the kitchen, not stomping, not yelling, just walking. But every step echoed like thunder. Melina stood frozen, surrounded by the shattered shell of the life they built. Her mouth moved like she wanted to say something more. But what could she possibly say? The truth had already detonated. And Darius? He had just walked away from the wreckage. But he wasn't done with it. Not even close. In the days that followed the confrontation, the Colton household became a house of shadows. The laughter was gone. The warmth. The rhythm of routine that once gave it life. Morning cartoons, evening prayers, weekend grocery runs. All of it vanished like smoke after a fire. Darius Colton moved through it like a ghost. He stopped eating at the table. The kids would ask him questions, and he'd nod, but he wasn't really there. His eyes stayed fixed on something invisible, some point beyond the walls, beyond time, beyond hope. At night, he barely slept. When he did, it was shallow, haunted, the kind of sleep where you wake up unsure of who you are or where. And when Melina tried to talk, he said nothing. Or worse, he left the room. He didn't yell. He didn't throw things. But his silence was deafening. The man who once filled that house with steady strength had become a stranger in his own skin. Sometimes he wouldn't come home after work. Just disappeared. No calls. No texts. Just long absences, followed by late returns, smelling faintly of alcohol and smoke. He spent hours at his cousin Marcus's auto shop on the west side. Not talking, just pacing. Brooding. Marcus Sloan, a guy who had seen Darius carry pain through war zones and hardship, had never seen him like this. "Man, you gotta talk to me," Marcus pleaded one night, tossing him a bottle of water. "You can't keep going like this. You ain't sleeping. You ain't eating. This ain't you." But Darius just shook his head, eyes vacant. "I thought they were mine," he whispered. "All of them." Marcus exhaled sharply. "I know, man. I know." But he didn't. No one really could. Because how do you explain that kind of betrayal? Not just one affair. Not just one child. 4. For lives he gave everything for. And none of them were biologically his. And worse, The woman who held that truth had looked him in the eye for 12 years and lied. Not once, not twice. Every day, with every hug, every kiss, every whispered, "I love you." The magnitude of that deception didn't just break him, it erased him. Who was he now? A husband? No. A father? Legally, maybe. Emotionally? He didn't know anymore. A man? Even that felt like a cruel question. His co-workers noticed the change. The guy who once showed up early and stayed late now called off without warning. When he did show, he barely spoke. His supervisor tried to reach out. HR left voicemails. No response. Bills piled up. The mortgage notice came in the mail, unopened, because none of it mattered anymore. What was the point of building a life that was never yours to begin with? Even the kids noticed. Tiana, 16, watched her dad drift farther every day. He used to hug her goodnight. Now he barely nodded. Her brothers whispered about how quiet he was, how he didn't smile anymore. Melina tried to maintain the illusion, kept the house running, cleaned, cooked, smiled at school pickups, but her voice trembled now. Her eyes darted nervously when Darius entered a room. She knew. She could feel it. He was unraveling. And worse, he was unraveling quietly. He started going to the bar near Marcus's shop, a dive called the Iron Post. The kind of place with peeling walls, sticky floors, and no judgment. It didn't ask questions. It just served. Darius would sit at the far end, nursing a glass of bourbon, staring into nothing. The bartender knew better than to talk. He didn't come for conversation. He came to disappear. Sometimes he imagined confronting Melina again, not with words, but with something darker, something final. He didn't act on it. Not yet. But the thoughts lingered, like smoke in his lungs, like static behind every heartbeat. And that terrified him, because Darius Colton had always been a protector, a provider, a man who stood between chaos and his family. But now, he was the chaos. Everywhere he went, the betrayal followed him like a shadow. He'd see a father laughing with his kids at a grocery store and feel sick. He'd hear a baby cry on TV and shut it off like a gunshot had gone off. Nothing felt safe. Nothing felt real. Even his reflection looked like a stranger. He'd stare at himself in the mirror and whisper, "Who are you?" And no answer ever came. Because the man who once lived in that body, the father, the husband, the fighter, had been buried beneath 12 years of lies. And all that was left was a man hollowed out by love that wasn't real, and a truth he could never forget. It happened on a Wednesday night. Not with a scream, not with a fight, just a quiet glow in the corner of a dark room. The house had fallen into its nightly rhythm. The kids were upstairs. Laughter faded into sleep. Cartoons left paused on bedroom TVs. The hum of a box fan filled the hallway. Melina sat on the couch, scrolling absently through her phone. Darius was slumped in the old recliner across the room, silent, watching, breathing. He hadn't said a word in over an hour, hadn't touched his plate at dinner. His bourbon sat untouched on the end table beside him. The ice long melted into nothing. The television flickered low, showing a late-night documentary neither of them was watching. The room was dim, lit only by the soft orange glow of a corner lamp. Melina's thumb kept moving. Swipe, tap, scroll. And then it happened. A ding. Her phone lit up. A small chime. A message. She hesitated for just a second. Barely. But he caught it. Her face changed. It wasn't shock. It wasn't guilt. It was recognition. Familiarity. A soft flutter behind her eyes. She tilted the screen slightly away from him. And Darius saw it. A name. Not a random one. Not spam. Not a co-worker. A man's name. One he recognized. One of the names that had haunted him since those DNA tests arrived. One of the men who unknowingly fathered one of his children. And now, here he was again, not in the past, not a memory, but inside their home. On her phone, sending messages in the dark. The silence that had lived inside Darius Colton for weeks. The silence of heartbreak, of humiliation, of hopelessness, suddenly evaporated. Not in a shout, not in a slam of fists. It left behind something sharper. Clarity. This wasn't over. She hadn't let them go. She hadn't cut ties. She hadn't chosen truth. She had chosen comfort. He had begged her, days ago, with his eyes, his silence, his broken posture, to give him something real, to show she understood what she had done. But no, she was still entertaining ghosts, still leaving the door open for men who had taken from him what he could never get back. That message? That was the final thread. And now it snapped. He didn't move right away. His face didn't twitch. His hands didn't shake. He just sat there, staring at her, his eyes heavy with something deeper than rage. Resignation. Because this moment, was the proof he hadn't wanted, but always feared. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't done. And she wasn't his. Darius stood slowly. No words. No sound. Melina didn't notice. He turned, walked down the hall. His footsteps soft on the hardwood. The same hallway where his kids once learned to walk. Where he used to tiptoe past their doors after late shifts. Now, it felt like a corridor of ghosts. He entered the bedroom. Paused. Everything in the room, the photos, the blankets, the closet cracked just wide enough to show her favorite dress. It all felt fake. A museum of a life that never existed. He opened the drawer beside the bed. Reached in. The weight in his hand was cold and familiar. His old service pistol, a relic from another life. One he'd sworn never to use again. He stood there in silence. No trembling. No second thoughts. Just the heavy, irreversible gravity of a man who had nothing left to protect and nothing left to lose. He didn't feel powerful. He didn't feel strong. If anything, he felt empty. But within that emptiness, a decision had grown. Not a decision born of chaos, but of precision. He had carried this pain long enough. Carried it through every meal, every lie, every I love you, that now felt like poison. And now, he was done carrying. Back in the living room, Melina sat under the glow of the lamp, still scrolling, still smiling faintly at her screen. She didn't look up when he reappeared, didn't notice the change in the air, didn't see the silence settle over him like armor. Darius stood in the doorway, his outline barely a shadow. His voice, when he finally spoke, was calm, controlled. "You never stopped, did you?" Melina froze. She looked up, her face suddenly pale. "Darius, don't lie," he said. "Not now." Her mouth opened, closed, and that's when she saw it. The gun. Her body tensed. The phone slipped from her hand onto the couch. She took a step back. "Please, let's talk." But it was too late. The talking had ended the moment she opened that message. And the man standing in front of her, he wasn't angry. He was done. Midnight had settled over the Colton household like a heavy, breathless fog. Upstairs, the children slept, tucked beneath blankets, stitched with bedtime prayers. Their dreams were innocent, untouched. They had no idea that, just down the hall, the world as they knew it was about to shatter. The hallway was dim, lit only by the faint spill of moonlight through the blinds. The soft hum of a box fan whispered in the distance. The air was still, thick with silence. Darius Colton moved slowly, deliberately. Each step landed like a memory. The same floorboards he once crept across with birthday gifts hidden behind his back, now groaned beneath the weight of finality. In his hand, the cold weight of steel. The same gun he once kept locked away for safety. Now it was freedom. He reached the master bedroom. The door was half open, same as always. Inside, Melina lay in bed, propped up on a pillow, phone still glowing in her hand. She didn't look up, didn't see him standing there, didn't know. She was still scrolling through the life she had preserved behind his back. Conversations he would never be allowed to unsee. Connections she had never truly severed. And yet, there she was, lying in their bed, in his house, under the weight of a lie so deep it had its own heartbeat. Darius stood in the doorway, silent, still. The moonlight touched the edge of his face. His chest rose and fell with calm, steady breaths. No anger, no panic, just resolve. He stepped into the room. The carpet muted his footsteps. Melina finally looked up. "Darius," she whispered, voice fragile, uncertain. But he said nothing. She sat up straighter, alarm flickering across her face. Her eyes darted to his hand. And then she knew. "Wait," she began, but it was already over. The first shot rang out like thunder sealed inside a bottle. Sharp, sudden, final. Her body jolted once. The phone slipped from her fingers, landing on the sheets with a soft thud. Then came a second shot. A clean, echoless punctuation. Melina slumped back against the pillows. Her chest no longer moved. Her eyes, wide and still, stared past the ceiling. She didn't scream. There was no time for that. Only stillness. Only silence. Blood soaked into the sheets, dark, thick, blooming like a secret finally told. And just like that, she was gone. The woman he had loved. The mother of the children he had raised. The architect of the lie that had destroyed him. Gone. Darius stood there for a few moments longer. Watching. Breathing. It didn't feel like victory. It didn't even feel like justice. It felt empty. A silence so deep it rang. He turned his back to the bed, to the body, to the betrayal, and walked out. He passed each of his children's doors. Didn't pause. Didn't peek in. He didn't need to see them. He knew they were safe, asleep, untouched, still living in the lie. And now, that lie had no more oxygen. In the living room, the same lamp glowed orange beside the recliner. The bourbon glass sat where he had left it. Untouched, he sat down beside it, picked up his phone, dialed 911. When the dispatcher answered, his voice was flat. "Hello. There's been a shooting," he said. "Who's been shot, sir?" "My wife," he replied. He gave the address, the name, then hung up. No explanation, no pleading, just facts. He placed the phone on the coffee table, the gun beside it, and then he waited. The clock on the wall ticked softly. A dog barked in the distance, and Darius Colton sat there, still as stone, staring into the dark. Outside, the world continued unchanged. But inside that house, inside that man, everything had ended. The red and blue lights came in waves. They washed over the front lawns and street signs, flickering across driveways and tree trunks like fireflies with sirens. The calm Eastwood night, once quiet, forgettable, now pulsed with urgency. The neighbors gathered slowly. Pajamas, house slippers, confused stares. Most didn't say a word. Just watched. Watched the cruisers roll up. Watched the paramedics hop out. Watched the officers draw their weapons and move in. But nothing prepared them for what they saw next. Darius Colton, sitting on his front porch. Calm, upright, hands resting on his knees like he was waiting for a train. The gun lay beside him, neatly placed, not hidden, not clutched. He didn't look at the officers, didn't flinch. He just raised his hands and surrendered. No resistance, no words, just stillness. The first officers approached with practiced caution, voices firm, movements crisp. Hand where we can see them. Darius didn't move. He didn't need to, because in that moment, he wasn't a threat. He was a man already emptied. The cuffs clicked shut around his wrists. Cold steel, final punctuation. And still, he said nothing. Inside the house, the scene was just as he left it. The master bedroom glowed faintly in the moonlight. Melina's body slumped in still repose against the headboard, the pillow stained deep crimson beneath her. The gunshots had been clean, quick, precise. No struggle, no defensive wounds, just silence after betrayal. A single phone, hers, lay face down on the bed, its screen dark now, unread. And then came the worst part, the part no one could prepare for. The children. They had slept through it. The shots, the sirens, even the raised voices. Years of routine had made them deep sleepers. They hadn't heard a thing, but they woke as the flashing lights danced through their curtains, as unfamiliar voices filled the hallway, as the cold edge of reality began to slice into their home. One by one, the officers found them. For kids, rubbing their eyes, clutching blankets, confused. The youngest, Caleb, began to cry first. Softly at first, then louder, shrill, gutting. He didn't understand. None of them did, but they could feel it, that something awful had happened, that something was missing. And then they saw the uniforms, the stretchers, the whispers. They asked for their mom. They asked for their dad. But the answers came not in words, but in silence. Child Protective Services arrived shortly after. Blankets were wrapped around shoulders. Stuffed animals clutched tightly. Questions were asked in soft voices. Do you know your name? Do you remember what happened? But the kids only stared, wide-eyed, lost. One of the twins vomited in the driveway. Tiana, the eldest, tried to hold her siblings together. She wrapped her arms around them, whispered that everything was going to be okay, even though she didn't believe it for a second. They were loaded into separate cars, driven away from the only home they'd ever known, away from a backyard where they'd learned to ride bikes, from the kitchen where birthday candles once flickered, from the wreckage of love turned to ash. Back in the squad car, Darius sat stone-faced. His eyes stared straight ahead. He didn't ask for a lawyer. He didn't ask for anything. When they questioned him at the precinct, he answered plainly. He told them what had happened, step by step, word for word. He told them about the DNA tests, about the confrontation, about the message on her phone, about the decision, not with pride, not with shame, just with detachment, like a man reporting what he had witnessed, not what he had done. Only once did he falter. When they asked him about the kids, he looked down then, just for a moment, as if the weight of what he'd done finally brushed his shoulders, as if for just 1 second he remembered the feel of their tiny hands in his, the sound of their laughter, the names that once meant everything. But the moment passed. He blinked, and the wall returned. Outside the precinct, the world began to spin. News alerts, social media. Father kills wife after DNA test reveals none of the children are his. The headlines were already forming, the opinions already boiling. But for now, inside that small cell, behind that locked door, Darius Colton sat alone. Not crying, not raging, just breathing, just waiting. Because he knew this was only the beginning of what would come next. The courthouse was packed. The people of Eastwood came in coats and ties, press badges and prayer hands, all gathered to witness the unraveling of a man they thought they knew. And across the country, the headline screamed, "Man murders wife after DNA tests reveal children aren't his." Marine veteran turned killer. The Darius Colton trial begins. Fatherhood, betrayal, and blood, America watches. Inside the courtroom, Darius sat at the defense table, trimmed, dressed in a plain suit, hands folded, eyes fixed straight ahead, unmoving, unshaken, like a man already sentenced in his soul long before the trial even began. He had pleaded not guilty by reason of temporary insanity, a move that would decide whether he spent life behind bars or life in a psychiatric ward. The prosecution had other plans. They didn't see a man who snapped. They saw a man who planned. The jury, 12 strangers with no stake in the game, watched it all unfold. The opening arguments were like fire and ice. The defense painted Darius as a man pushed beyond the boundaries of human endurance. A husband who was deceived not once, but 4 times. A father betrayed at the cellular level. A Marine who held pain until it consumed him from the inside out. He loved them, his attorney said, pacing slowly before the jury. He raised those children. He gave his life for that family. And when he discovered it was all a lie, it didn't just hurt. It broke something that can't be put back. They called experts, psychiatrists, behavioral scientists. They used words like emotional collapse, dissociative episode, delayed trauma response. They showed photos of Darius before it all happened, smiling with his kids, grilling in the backyard, standing in a Little League uniform with his arm around Cameron's shoulders. This was not a killer, they said. This was a man who lost everything in the blink of an eye. But the prosecution? They were surgical. They didn't attack his pain, they acknowledged it. And then they dismantled it. They brought in search history logs, showed browser screenshots, how to kill without leaving evidence. Can a DNA test be faked? Fastest way to shoot someone fatally. Each search had a date, a time, and all of them were before the night Melina died. They called that premeditation. They called that murder. They played the 911 call. Darius's voice, cold, composed. There's been a shooting. My wife. Here's the address. They pointed to the fact that he waited until the kids were asleep, that he didn't lash out during a fight, that he walked down a hallway, that he loaded a gun, that he aimed, that he fired twice, once in the chest, once in the head, deliberate, final, unmistakable. The prosecutor stepped forward. This wasn't a moment of madness, she said. It was a decision, a punishment. Witnesses took the stand. Melina's cousin, trembling, tear-streaked, said she never saw abuse, only distance in the final weeks. Darius's co-worker said he'd gone quiet, distant, like a man slipping away from himself. Marcus Sloan, his cousin, the one who saw it all unravel, sat in silence for a long moment before saying, "He changed. He was broken. But I never thought he'd do this." Then came the moment everyone had waited for. Darius Colton on the stand. His voice was low, calm, controlled. No theatrics. He told them everything. The DNA tests. The moment he opened them in his truck. The confrontation in the kitchen. The late-night message on her phone. And the silence that followed. He didn't beg. Didn't weep. When asked if he regretted it, he paused. Then said, "I regret trusting the wrong person. But I don't regret ending the lie." The room went still. His attorney winced. The jury watched. Some horrified. Some haunted. Some unsure what to believe. And then, the closing statements. The prosecution drove it home. You can feel sorry for him. You can even understand his pain. But you cannot excuse premeditated execution. The defense pleaded for mercy. He was a father living a lie. A man without a map. Lost in betrayal too deep for most to imagine. And then, it was in the jury's hands. 12 strangers. 12 hearts. 12 verdicts. They deliberated for 2 days. When they returned, the room held its breath. The judge unfolded the paper. The air tensed like a held scream. "We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of first-degree murder." Silence. No sobs. No shouts. Darius didn't flinch. He stood when instructed. Let the cuffs return to his wrists. Didn't look at the jury. Didn't look at Melina's family. He just looked straight ahead, as if he'd known all along what the end would be. Because deep down, he had. The camera was steady. The studio quiet. Just soft lights. A beige chair. A glass of water set neatly on a side table. And a 16-year-old girl seated across from the host. Hands folded, eyes glassy, voice trembling but clear. Tiana Colton. She hadn't spoken publicly since the night everything changed. But now, she had something to say. Not to explain. Not to justify. But to be heard. Her hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail. She wore a simple sweater. No muck-up. No smile. Just the raw weight of grief sitting across from the nation. "I know what people think," she began. "They think my dad's a monster." Her voice cracked on the word dad. She swallowed hard. Took a breath. But before all of this, he was the best father anyone could ask for. Her lips trembled, but she didn't stop. He was there when I scraped my knee in 3rd grade. He was the only dad who showed up to every choir recital. Every single one. He used to call me his quiet storm. Said I had strength in me, even when I didn't know it. Tears slid down her cheeks. But no one saw that. They only saw what he did at the end. She paused. Let the silence settle. And I'm not saying it was right. It wasn't. What he did destroyed everything. It destroyed us. But I also know he didn't wake up one day and decide to be a killer. The interviewer leaned forward gently. "Then what happened, Tiana?" She looked down, then up again. He was lied to, over and over, and it broke him. After the sentencing, the Colton children were separated, divided among distant relatives, each placed in different homes by court-appointed guardians. The family photo, once framed in their living room, now just a memory. Caleb, the youngest, cried for his mother every night. He didn't understand why she wasn't coming back, why his dad didn't tuck him in anymore. Jalen and Cameron, the twins, became silent. Their once boisterous energy now replaced with confusion, nightmares, and a fear of doorbells. Tiana tried to hold them together. FaceTime calls, letters, bedtime recordings. But it wasn't enough. The warmth was gone. The glue that held them had melted in blood. Melina's funeral was held on a quiet Sunday. Closed casket, soft music, tightly folded programs read. In loving memory of Melina Ray Colton, 1987 to 2025. Few people spoke. Those who did kept it brief. Her cousin read a poem. Her mother, through tears, reminded the room that Melina had once been a girl who laughed in church, danced barefoot in the kitchen, and loved fiercely, if not always wisely. No one denied her mistakes, but no one justified how it ended. And in that room, packed with silence and unspoken questions. Her absence rang louder than any eulogy. Back in his cell, Darius received one visit. Tiana, arranged by the court, chaperoned, monitored. She sat across from him at the metal table, her hands shaking in her lap. He looked older, grayer, smaller somehow. She didn't say much. Neither did he. But when their eyes met, something passed between them. Not forgiveness, not understanding, just pain. Pure. Shared. She stood to leave, then turned back. I still love you, she whispered. And then she walked away. The house on Millstone Street now sits empty. The grass has grown long. The mailbox leans. The windows collect dust instead of light. Inside, the photos are gone. The laughter is gone. The heartbeat is gone. All that remains is silence. The kind that lingers. The kind that never lets go. Tiana ended the interview with a final message. My father made a choice, and that choice took everything from us. I don't excuse it. I don't justify it. But I remember who he was before the world took him apart. She looked directly into the camera. And I just want people to understand something. DNA doesn't make you a parent. Love does. And he loved us. For every scraped knee, every school project, every nightmare, he loved us. A long pause. And we loved him back. The screen faded to black. And with it, the last breath of a story that began in love and ended in unthinkable loss.